So just a quick reminder, everyone, or hopefully everyone, knows that there are specific legally required IEP team participants, either required at all IEP team meetings or depending on student needs. So what we are going to talk about is, given the additional logistics and this newness to a lot of us for these virtual meetings, is that there are some things that we need to think through. Now, some of the things on the next several slides we've already touched on a little bit. In this section of the presentation, what we want you thinking about is who should be assigned to these tasks that are additional logistics or things during the meeting, follow up after the meeting that teams need to think about because these things are new. So who gets assigned to those things will be dependent on several factors: what their official IEP team role is, their technology skills, their general communication skills, the relationship that they may have with parent or student. So some things to be thinking about: who's going to do these things before the meeting. As far as information and documents, making sure that someone is assigned and knows who's going to be providing the needed information and documents ahead of the meeting and how it will be shared. So things like if they need login, and if a parent needs to be assigned a login information and password, who's getting that to them? Is the draft IEP going to be sent in the mail or emailed, or is it just going to be screen sharing? So knowing who's going to be responsible for those things is an important thing to think about. This is especially important because it may be a situation where you have multiple different ways of sharing various pieces of information or documents to different people. So maybe the parent wants some things mailed to them and other things emailed. Maybe the classroom teacher has work samples that they want to make sure that they're able to share. So someone coordinating all the logistics of all that is going to be important ahead of time. As far as the navigating and troubleshooting the technology, there are several things to think about, such as, do you want to put together a quick video tutorial on how to use the system? I forget if it was Letha or Jill that talked about having a pre-practice IEP meeting, or just screenshot checklist kind of in step-by-step instructions, some way to make sure that everyone on the team is prepared the meeting. The idea being, the more familiar people are with the technology and the meeting tools, the smoother the meeting will go. It can also help get the exploring bug out of people's systems. So getting over the, oh neat, look, I can change my background to Mr. Rogers' living room. Getting that stuff out of the way before the meeting is important. Some other logistics considerations for during the meeting: consider having someone assigned to sort of monitor the room for technology concerns. This is especially important if an IEP team member drops off the call or is having technical issues. Particularly if it is a parent, you don't want important discussion going on while a parent gets knocked off a call. You're essentially having an IEP team meeting, and carrying it on without a parent really can cause some procedural safeguard issues if a parent's not fully involved in the meeting and they want to be. So someone to monitor just whether someone's speaking and they're on mute. Someone to just remind, hey, we can't hear you, but we can see you. You might want to unmute. Monitoring things like that. Consider having someone sort of be assigned as like the meeting moderator, to be keeping an eye on the time, to make sure people are following the established norms, to make sure that if we need to get redirected to the agenda, they can do that. As far as documentation for the meeting, making sure you're accurately documenting the meeting is obviously very important, particularly when you're putting things into an IEP. That IEP, again, just like in a regular meeting, needs to reflect the consensus of the IEP team. So there's a couple of things to consider as far as documentation. Now, As I have gotten into more and more virtual meetings, I have had to kind of change some practices of my own. So for instance, in an IEP meeting, the case manager oftentimes is the one facilitating the meeting and taking their notes or updating the IEP. Given that there are more things to kind of keep an eye on in virtual meetings, the chat box and other things, you may want to consider having a facilitator not be responsible for doing the, say, updating the draft of the IEP. Really in this, you should start with what your typical practice is and then adapt from there if needed. It's certainly possible that you may not miss a beat in documenting the IEPs any differently than you would in a face-to-face meeting. Thinking about, again, what team members will be seeing, whether it's screen sharing, it might be the most efficient and parent-friendly way to share information and help people focus on what's being discussed, as opposed to having to flip through hard copies of things and jump around on screens or through tabs on your own computer. And then really think about the chat feature, other ways that communication happens virtually that doesn't necessarily happen in a face-to-face meeting. So in communication and engagement considerations. So again, we've heard a lot about the relationship with the parent and communicating. This is probably the biggest difference and maybe the most important area of considerations for virtual IEP meetings, because communication is quite simply just different virtually than it is in a face-to-face meeting. So it's really important to keep in mind the special education process in general, including IEP meetings, can be very stressful on parents and caregivers. Parents can feel intimidated, confused, anxious under the best of circumstances in an IEP meeting or in the special education process. So you add on top of that the additional stress that we're all feeling, that families are now experiencing, and now we're asking parents to engage and make important decisions about their kids' future, when many aspects of the near future are right now pretty ambiguous. So it's really important to maintain your professionalism. You can see I put some emojis on this slide. You really need to maintain your professionalism. Emojis in some cases may actually make it feel more personal and relaxed, but it also may confuse or offend. So careful how you are interacting and communicating virtually. Again, we've talked about confidentiality a little bit before, and Sharon mentioned the information about nonverbals. So really take the time in those pre-meetings and those pre-meeting conversations to really help families and parents feel comfortable. So just some more roles that you're going to want to think about in terms of communication and engagement. Again, making sure someone is on top of queuing and checking in with parents, paraphrasing and clarifying for parents, the information that's being shared. Again, just those things that are good regular meeting practices. When you're transitioning over to virtual meetings, to start, it may be a good idea to have someone specifically sort of assigned to these tasks, because if you're not able to catch a parent kind of raise their eyebrows or shake their head or read their facial expressions that shows they're confused or have a question, really being proactive about making sure you're checking in, that you're paraphrasing for them because of those missing nonverbals. And then using the chat function. So this can be a great thing to limit interruptions. If someone just has a quick question, when you're doing virtual meetings and multiple people have microphones, when two people speak at once, I'm sure those of you who have now been in lots of virtual meetings notice that that can really cut down on the efficiency of a meeting, and there's a lot of back and forth. Oh, no, you go ahead. No, you go ahead. Those are things that you want to, that chat can help avoid, but use it wisely and make sure when you're going over norms and things that people are clear on how that's going to work. Because if I try and chat hey, I didn't understand that, or hey, what about this for a goal? The timing may be off between the verbal conversation and the chat. So it's just something to be aware of, that chat can be a great tool, but it can also add some confusion. So last thing in terms of considerations, making sure that people are, that someone is specifically assigned to this one in terms of agreement, disagreement. In my head, the most likely candidate for this role or to be assigned this would be the LEA representative. But again, given the medium that you're going through cyberspace to communicate, someone needs to keep an eye on making sure you have true consensus on decisions, particularly important decisions. But in face-to-face IEP meetings, it's pretty easy to just kind of look around the room and watch for the head nods and facial expressions and body language for agreement. Someone needs to be ready to facilitate and manage if there is not consensus, how to either build toward consensus or be prepared for more complicated or contentious questions or decisions. Nissan, again, had some things he wanted to share here.
Sure, thank you, Tim. So WSCMS, the Wisconsin Special Ed Mediation System, is now operating virtually, and mediators and IEP facilitators are available to assist by conducting virtual mediation or virtual IEP facilitation. Typically, parents and educators seek IEP facilitation when there are issues of trust or communication. Whereas, on the other hand, mediation is sought when there are specific disputes. For example, disagreements with how the IEP is being implemented, the behavior management of the student, the use of paraprofessional, the amount of time in the pull-out classroom, etc. Now, you can obtain a request for mediation or request for IEP facilitation form. You can find it on the WSCMS.us website under the Forms tab. Gia, would you like to add anything?
Yes. So just so folks know, I'm still answering the phones as well. So if people do have questions about the system or how we could be helpful, feel free to give a call. And the phone number's on the website, or my email's on the website as well. So we're available throughout this time. Additionally, I think one of our strengths of our system is that we are constantly trying to help the parties find consensus early and often. And one way that people can do that is through identifying norms that would be helpful. So virtual IEPs, this is a new culture for all of us, and so there aren't established norms. And so it could be an interesting discussion to have with everyone on the team as to, for example, what might prevent me from sitting for an hour and a half. It could be that their pets or children or deliveries that they're expecting or medications that need to be taken. All those things might interfere, but that also offers opportunities for folks to understand a little bit more about the home life, and for everyone on the team, not just parents, and then also build relationships and form those relationships a little bit stronger. The last comment I would make is that in addition to sort of thinking about formats about how people will participate, there could be power imbalances with different formats. So for example, if I'm participating by phone, the chat feature may be difficult for me to use. So those are all things to talk about and think about as a team.
And as people are typing in a few more ideas, I wanted to also introduce Jill. You were going to talk about an idea.
Yeah, I had a question come in about, keeping an agenda for IEP meetings. What we have found, especially with sharing information and sharing documents on a screen, can be very difficult. The verbiage too for parents and others that attend can also be confusing. So we did, as Letha mentioned, have a slide deck and broke that down. We have a template slide deck we use that we make copies of for each of our meetings. And it really is basically the IEP forms broken into sections. We start with a slide as you see now. It's nice and big. We have the people listed as far as who's attending, and then we'll go off that list, being the moderator of who will go off that list in order of introductions. The next slides then we have, we focus on like those strengths, and we have the student and parent speak, and a lot of it's moderated. It'll say right on the slide who will, speak first, and helps with that, everybody taking the microphone at once. And then each slide is basically a part of that IEP. We go into the present levels, functional performance, and needs. We will take information from their current IEP that we're reviewing and put it on those slides to really make it parent friendly. We add questions to those slides for a student or parent to answer. And we share out those slides in advance to any other members of that team, whether it's an occupational therapist. If they're going to go through their slide on goals and their progress reports, they'll add to that slide deck. We'll share that out to the family in advance too, so they know what's being covered. But it really helps keep us on track. And then in terms of time, we will tell the parents, we have about 32 slides to get through, or and they can kind of see as we go as far as where we're at in that process. And like I said, it does have little, we add questions on there to help stir that discussion and with that parent and student. It has been very helpful with keeping on track and making it more discussion based, as well as covering all parts of that IEP in a presentation that's friendly.
So again, this is essentially what a traditional LEA representative's role will be, but again, there's just some different factors that go in when you're in a virtual meeting. So finally, Sharon is going to share some quick information about after IEP meetings and enhancing any future virtual IEP meetings.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. So here's a few comments from parents just about what happened after the IEP meeting. So the first parent said, I did not get a rough copy of what was discussed so I could compare with the final copy. I did not get a follow-up call or email to go over the IEP to make sure I understood. Another quote, do what the team has agreed to and what is in the IEP. If you can't, then let me know. It becomes very difficult to trust the people entrusted with my child's learning when the IEP is not followed. So just a few things you want to keep in mind after the virtual IEP meeting. Just briefly survey all the IEP team participants on the virtual meeting experience, and then follow up on comments that were made during the meeting. I was monitoring the chat after we posed the question of what do you typically do to follow up after an IEP meeting. Many of you are already checking in with parents via phone or email, so that's awesome. One participant said that they have been following up via video chat, so just find out from the parents how they would be most comfortable following up with you. You also want to check in with your IEP team members, make sure that they know when they need to complete their edits and revisions to the IEP so it can be sent out in a timely manner. And just to wrap things up, again, remember relationships matter, especially in the situation that we're currently in. Continue to check in with your students and families. Use this as another very unique and rare opportunity to continue to build those relationships together. Check in with your colleagues, make sure everyone's doing well, and just continue to lean on each other and support one another.
All right, as we wrap up and move into our post-webinar discussion, there is a large list of resources, and Sharon put all of the things we have talked about together. Someone asked that on the PDF version they could not access these, so we'll put this in a Google Doc version in the participant folder in the next hour or so, so that you can access all of these rich resources and then some of the references we used for today. I want to thank our presenters and our contributors today. And then we're just going to go ahead and stay on for anyone who wants to stay on to engage in a little bit post-webinar discussion and maybe get into some of the questions.